record on this.
Got it.
Okay, good. Thanks, Dave. All right. I wrote this so I wouldn't screw it up. Let's see. We take particular pride in Jennifer, who is the daughter of John and Gail Trantham, our first full-time ministerial family. Jennifer grew up in this fellowship and has been active in various aspects since they arrived in 1982. She has been teaching or administering in the Las Cruces Public Schools since 2001. Her timely topic this afternoon is the new breed of school kids, and I'll let her explain from here. It's yours, Jennifer.
All righty. So I was standing in my classroom after returning after COVID. Well, let me back up and I'll just tell you a little bit about, expand on what Charlie just shared. I was out of the classroom for several years as an instructional specialist and then as a math content specialist. And I decided that working with adults was not near as fun as working with the kids. So I decided to go back to the classroom. And when I returned to the classroom, I'm looking out at my students, and I was at a different school. So initially I attributed these different beasts to being at a different school, but than the one I had been at previously. But as I got to working with them, I realized there's a whole different group of kids sitting here. And then we had COVID and we had the year of remote learning. And when we came back to the classroom, it was a whole different thing. The difference was palpable. It was very obvious. And I had to research, like being my geeky self and who I am, I had to figure out who in the world were these kids sitting in front of me, because they were not the ones I started off my career teaching. So in that process of doing some research, I came across this really cool research project somebody had done back from 2014, before all of this, but it was even more relevant today. So I actually did this with the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students at my class in my school. And then I presented my learnings between the research project I did and between the research I was doing, primarily reading the work of Dr. Tim Elmore. You'll hear a lot about him. He's my new guru, my new go-to person. So with that, I'll jump into my presentation. And Vijay, you asked if I would explain the past generations, and that's exactly where to start. So just like in a classroom, we have to get that same background information that we have. Please feel free to ask questions, since this is a more informal presentation than what I did. This is a version of, so sometimes things are worded aimed at teachers, but it applies to, I think, to any age range. And I tried to take out a lot of the more teachery parts. Anyway, I'll get started on it. So any questions before I get started, or anything anybody wants me to make sure I touch on?
Now, your master's degree is in.
Okay, so I get to brag a little bit, and Vijay, and I get to say, which one?
Well, I guess the first and the second one.
Well, not the third one. No, I'm kidding.
Well,
I'm kidding. Let me explain. When I got my bachelor's degree, and right after I got my bachelor's degree, my father passed away. My bachelor's degree is in anthropology, for anyone who's interested. My master's degree was kind of an accident, the first one, because I didn't know what to do. My father had just died. I'd moved with the guy I'd been dating for several years to New York City, and I was like, yeah, no, this is not working out for me. So I came back to Las Cruces, not knowing what to do, and school was a very safe thing. I love learning, and it was a safe place for me to be. So I took some classes, and I thought I was going to do like meeting management, go move to Hawaii or Colorado, some big resort, and manage big fancy meetings and weddings and stuff like that. That's not what happened. I met a lady in the program who was a psychologist, and she was a professor in the hospitality and tourism program, but her specialty was working with doing conflict resolution. So I got sucked into that. That spoke to my interest in anthropology hugely. And so I found myself working on a master's degree in hospitality and tourism, but really interested in working with rural communities for the most benefit with tourism, but the least effect on their communities, because tourism is a whole nother beast, right? But my minor was in educational management and development, because my heart was really, I had friends who had gone to community college at the time. It was Doñana Branch Community College, and they wanted to transfer over to NMSU, but their credits would not do a straight transfer. A few classes would go, but not all. So that was kind of the birth of my interest. And I'd been teaching computer classes to adults and through the community college. And I thought, okay, I can do this. So it was kind of an interest area. I knew I wanted to follow up on some point. And then a couple of years later, I have 2 kids. I have a husband, and I'm already looking at him going, I'm not sure this is going to work out. I need to make sure I'm solid. And so I decided to go back to school. And I was always afraid to become a teacher because I sucked at math, to be honest. And in the end, I found that ended up becoming my forte. So a few classes later and a lot of experience, I learned that I was actually a pretty good math teacher because I struggled with it. I was able to really help kids overcome their struggles with it. So bachelor's or master's degree in hospitality and tourism, then a master's degree in curriculum instruction. And then I went back to school and I got a master's degree in math education because it really spoke to me. And here I am today. So that's kind of the much more in-depth there. I was not going to explain all that, but there it is. And I'm still catching my breath, and I'm sorry if I start wandering too much.
I wanted others to know what you have been through. I knew all this, but I didn't think others knew.
Well, that's my background. And then, like I said, I spent a couple of years out of the classroom as an instructional specialist coaching teachers. And then I spent a year as a math content specialist supporting all the elementary schools in Las Cruces. And like I said, I decided in 2017 to return back to the classroom, and I'm much happier there. People invite me to leave a couple of times or join whatever the latest admin program is, and I say no, thank you. I don't want to deal with parents. I don't want to deal with adults and staff. I like the kids. So I'm got my feet planted here now. So that's my background. I love doing research. I love learning. I intimidate the bejeebers out of my principals because of that. They're not quite sure what to do with me. So I usually get left alone to my own devices. So anyway, let's see here if there's anything else I want to share before I move on. I think that's it. I did do this presentation. I asked my current principal and was very surprised she agreed to let me do this. And on our first day back to school, I presented this in the morning, that morning. So here it goes. Maybe. And then I want to go slide to. Okay. So you guys see everything okay?
No.
No, tell me what you see or don't see.
I see two main screens, the current one and the next one, and
Oh, really?
a banner across the bottom.
Okay, let me undo my second screen then. Now tell me what you see.
Nothing changed.
Okay, so what you're seeing, I see. So I'm going to stop share. You're seeing my notes and everything then.
Yes,
I wonder why.
that's,
If you want to see my notes, they're not very exciting, but
Jennifer, don't you just need to hit the
Slide mode.
the slide presentation,
Mhm.
and then
so let me just tell you that since I've used this, it has changed. So apparently, let me go back to share screen.
But it's not Zoom. It's, I don't,
What do you see right now? And I apologize.
see you and the library behind you.
Okay, good. At least that's what you see. Okay, and then when I share screen, I really wanted to have that up. That's okay.
there.
Yeah.
That's all, at least we see one with your notes. Okay.
Right, so what I'm gonna do is just put it in presentation mode here. And then I have a printout, fortunately, from an iteration ago, so I'll do the best I can. Play from start. I'd rather you guys have the full screen, especially from one of my next ones.
There.
All right, yay. Okay, so who is this alpha generation? And as I say here, what defines a generation changes over time, as do our students. So VJ, you were asking about what were the previous generations? And I don't know, do you guys see the bar, the Zoom bar? I'm moving.
No, we don't, but we see the headings at the top of each
Perfect.
column.
That's what I was not able to see, so I wanted to make sure you could. Thank you. So looking at this, I'll give you a second just to look at it. And I'm happy to share this when we're finished, if anybody wants copies of this. You can find this online too. This particular chart comes from Dr. Mark McCrindle, who's from Australia. So this has a little Australia bent to it. So for example, on Generation X, it says the car was the Holden Commodore, which I was like, what in the world is that? But that's the equivalent to our Oldsmobile Cutlass.
Oh,
So of interesting note, I thought it was kind of fun to look at the different types of things that the slang terms. There were 3 things I wanted to kind of look at, which was the slang terms, the social markers, and the leadership style. Everything else is kind of for fun. It helps to contextualize. But the slang terms, like for the builders, their social marker, by the way, was World War II. And they didn't have slang. They preferred proper English, if you please. The baby boomers, I can't even talk, were like, be cool, peace out, that's groovy. So we kind of get a sense of who they were. The big social marker in their time frame was the moon landing. Generation X, which is where I'm from, was like, hey, dude, or calling someone an ace, or as if. I remember that. So Valley Girl, as if, or that's wicked. And a Walkman. I just have to point that out because that was my time. Walkmans with CD players. I thought I was hip when I got the CD player. Generation Y is words like bling, or that's funky, or I loved when my students would be like, duh, fajizz, dude, or what's up? I'd have students who thought it was okay to come and talk to their teacher that way, just would floor me. What's up, teacher? And I'm like, no, my name's Miss Trantham, and you can say what's up. So I guess I was kind of like a builder there. Generation Z, which is where I started my generation, or started teaching, was with this generation, using emojis. So you see the little fire up there. I gotta hang out with the fam this weekend. I can't go to the movies. GOAT, greatest of all time is what that stands for. Or yes, queen. And some of these I can't even really try to give you examples of because it's just not in my vocabulary. And then this generation alpha that we're currently looking at. They use words like lit, yeet, hundo, oof, RN, and IDRC. Does anyone know what RN or IDRC means?
No.
No. RN means right now. It's this short texting. Kids talk and text nowadays. And IDRC, I don't really care. Not very nice, huh? But they write that down on their paper sometimes. I'm like, so tell me what you're thinking. IDRC. I'm like, whoa, we don't talk to, that's not a proper way. So one of the skills that kids lack today is social emotional. And that's something we really need to, as adults and adult leaders in their lives, really be aware of and help them manage that. But I'm going to get to that more. When we look at the leadership style at the bottom, if you really think about this, will really see the difference in generations, from your parents to you, to your grandkids, to your children. You will really see this leadership style really start to play out. And it's very different now today, what works with kids. Kids don't take the I told you so. And there's some reasons behind that. But if we go back to the builder generation, out of necessity, World War II timeframe, it's, you know, the leader is, there's someone in charge and they're telling you what to do. You may not always agree with them, but there's a commander, somebody who's helping tell you what to do. Baby boomers, definitely. The ideal leader was a thinker, right? That definitely hits the whole groovy thing time frame, I think. Moving into Generation X, we're moving into a leader who was the coordinator, who could delegate. And then we got tired of somebody telling us what to do. Then the next generation wants a leader who's more of a supporter, who's supporting the people and helping set them up for success rather than just delegating. And then we have the empowering leader, a collaborator, where the leader is helping a group of people work, which is still different than the alpha generation, where they want the leader to be part of their group, not telling them what to do, but really supporting them, not from the outside, but from within. So they're more of a co-creator leader. So our leadership styles have hugely changed in this throughout since the builders and moving forward in the 20th century into the 21st. Okay, so then I have this a little differently looking at it, but same kind of information, 5 generations coming of age. Looking at the different generations again, the alpha generation is not on here right now, but it really helps us again contextualize, just another way to look at it. So the life paradigm of the builders, the silent generation, be grateful you have a job. And I definitely hear this in my family as I try to help my parents, whom most of you guys know, deal with their grandkids, my children, because it's a very different idea of their life paradigms. Be grateful you have a job. Then the boomers are, I deserve better. The Generation X, or the busters is a nickname for them, is keep it real. The millennial generation, life is a cafeteria. I get to pick and choose. And then Generation Z was, I'm hoping and coping. And then I think if we look at their attitude towards authority is really interesting. Be grateful you have a job and respect them. Whereas the boomers are with the I deserve better. We can replace the adults that we don't want to follow. Busters, keep it real, and we endure the adults or authority in our lives. Millennials, life is the cafeteria, we get to choose. And again, with I'm hoping and coping, and I'm not sure if I really need the authority. I definitely hear that language in the classrooms and with my own kids. I don't know what I just clicked on. There we go. Apparently I did not get all of my clicks out of this. I just wanted to straight slides today. So quick introduction to the alpha generation now. Most of the information, as I shared earlier, comes from Dr. Tim Elmore and his very insightful work. He is an expert in the generations, particularly the millennials, Gen Z, and now the alpha generation. He has some podcasts that are absolutely interesting to listen to, and they hit a variety of things in terms of dealing with the youth. So whether it's coaching or in the school or in a workplace. And when I was listening to some of his podcasts talking about the workplace, you really get to understand a little bit more about why we have such a need to hire people right now and are having a hard time filling jobs. It's a mindset of the generation. And then I had included on here, this was one of my teacher slides. Why is this important? So we can know and understand each generation as educators, but then I added today as well as adult leaders. That's grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, people who work with kids or interact with them in any way. It's important to understand the needs, I think, of the current generation. Just for fun, this was taking some of those terms from for the alpha generation, and I thought I'd help educate you guys. So you see the RN on there for right now, and then I'll start at the top in the big purple, oof, and that's kind of like, oh, ow, oof, I didn't mean to do that. Flex does not mean like to flex your arms. It means more like if you are flexing, if he was flexing today, he's showing what he knows. He's flexing with his math today. He's showing what he knows in math today. And then there's another term on there right under it called chuggy. And chuggy, oh, she's so chuggy, means she's really trying to look cool and look all modern, but she's not. That would be like me trying to dress like the kids might today as a 53-year-old. Doesn't cut it. Hundo is short for 100. Bussin means really cool. I had a student show up right after the pandemic in person when we got to start instruction in person. And she was like, "Ooh, this is bussin'." And I was like, what in the world? And so she had to explain to me and educate me. It means this is really, really cool. So bussin' means cool. Don't ask. IDC, I don't care. That's lit. That's really cool. And then yeet is really interesting. It's actually an old word that means to throw. In particular, it means to throw like something that doesn't have value to you. So if somebody, say, got a paper that had a D or an F on it, and they decide they were going to show you they didn't care, they would yeet it into the trash can. They would throw it into the trash can, and they might say yeet, which means I don't care. This is gone. I don't like it when students do that, by the way. Struggle with that. So I know I'm giving you guys a lot of information. So be thinking about questions you have, and I'll do my best to answer in a few minutes. But this is just, my brain gets going and I start talking faster and faster. So Katie, you can tell me to slow down too. So interesting fact, the Alpha generation is the largest generation ever to be born in the world. However, the American generation is the smallest. This Alpha generation is the smallest generation to be born, which of course is going to present some unique challenges and issues as time goes on. Because with our population and our infrastructure built for the larger generation and it's shrinking, it'll be interesting to see what exactly that does for us. But it also really made me think when we started having, when the Supreme Court was making their decision about abortion, how does that play into their decision making too? And I completely disagree with what happened, and I'm absolutely disgusted. But it was an interesting angle to take on thinking about it. What might have been their motivation to undo Roe versus Wade. This group is the most likely, or they're likely to be the most educated ever. They're likely to be the most technologically immersed generation. Dr. Elmore shared a story of a kid, his daughter had started teaching preschool, and she came home one day and was sharing with her parents her experiences. And she had this kid who had gone and gotten a hard book off the shelf. And he sat down to start looking at the hard book, and he studied the front. And then after a few minutes, he started trying to use his finger to flip the pages, and it wouldn't flip. So the teacher, of course, had to explain, this is not a tablet. You actually have to flip open the top in order to turn the pages like this. And she had to show him. But these kids are growing up with technology. They were born. This is the first generation that was born with technology 100% in their hands. And it is changing the skill sets they come into the schools with. And for that matter, I have 2 grandchildren. I have an adopted granddaughter, and I have my son has an adopted daughter and his own daughter. And so my 2 kids, watching them and how they interact, and one of them 17, 18 months old. And it's amazing what she knows what to do with the phone already. But you see that going through the grocery store too. Parents hand their kids a phone to entertain them. They're the most material, they will be the most material, I cannot say the word, materially endowed generation ever. They are will be the most impatient generation ever, because they are used to instant gratification. And I see this in the classroom, and I heard it in the survey loud and clear. They're just used to an immediate response. They play a game, they want to get to the next level, they start clicking around till they can get to the next level. But they get, when you're on a tablet or a computer, you can have that instant gratification that you don't get when you have to work for something in real time without technology. The most self-directed generation ever. And then a lot of this is because as they're paying attention to their TikTok and YouTubes and whatever else they're doing on their computers or their devices, they are getting a lot of ideas that they would not get just by talking to other people, humans around them. And then there's a little bit more to this, which I'm going to hit on in a minute. So if I repeat myself, I apologize, but I will share. They're also used to, well, no, I'll hit it in a minute. Sorry. They're more likely to experience, who love the typo, more virtual relationships than human relationships, because they can talk to Siri, they can talk to Alexa and Google, and they react, they respond. And this is different. And I put on there, this is going to happen more and more in their lifetime. So we can think Star Trek in the way that Star Trek, they're always talking to the computer and the computer responds to them and gives them information. And sometimes they don't even ask for the information. And they're most likely to spend childhood without both biological parents present in the same home. And I definitely, and throughout my entire career, I've seen, divorced families and whatnot, but it is ever more true today, never more true today than I can't even get that out. Thank you, than it was in the past. It is, this year I have several kids being raised by grandparents. They're not allowed to have access or any kind of connection with their parents. I've got a couple of kids who are with one parent but not the other, and there's all kinds of custody issues. I only have 2 that are actually in shared custody, and that to me is interesting because used to parents were divorced, there was shared custody, and there's less of that and more of just one primary biological parent having to do with the kids or coming to school and supporting them and whatnot. So it's very interesting to see that. And sad. Oh, I've got some kids this year, sad stories. They break my heart. So we'll look for just a moment at autonomy, anxiety, and agency in regards to previous generations and this new alpha generation. In the past, kids would get their answers from mom and dad. Hey mom, hey dad, why are there stars in the sky? But today, the alpha generation knows how to get answers from their technology. They don't need the adults the same way. Anxiety, previous generations, anxiety was not the norm. If somebody struggled with anxiety, we were really looking at what's happening. But today it's become normalized. And forgive me for sharing a morbid story, but this is a true story. My older son, who's not alpha generation, but it highlights this exactly. He was in high school and a friend of his said, hey, check this out. And he shoved his phone at my son. My son focuses on the screen and what he sees is a woman from Juarez being beheaded. It was true. It was not a fake video. That was very disturbing to my son. We had to do a lot of talking through that, and it's sad that the kids see these kinds of things, but they get it all the time with TikTok, with YouTube. It's constant, and kids can be at school. We try to filter out pornographic material, but people who put pornographic material up actually put tag words on that come up in the kids' feeds. So it's sad, but it does definitely add to anxiety and adds to information the kids don't need at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. Agency, in the past, it was more of you learn first, you finish school, you go to college, your life just kind of unfolds. You get married, have kids. That was kind of the way life worked. Learn first, finish school, life happens. With the alpha generation, they don't feel the need to wait. And I see this again all the time in school. Kids get these ideas, they're watching YouTube and they're like, ooh, she's making slime. I want to make slime. They go in the kitchen and pull everything out. And you walk in and say, whoa, what did you do to my kitchen? I'm making slime. They're just following the YouTube video. But they get all kinds of ideas between YouTube, and I really think YouTube's more outdated now. It's more TikTok, but which I've avoided getting to know. Another thing that goes with that on a positive side, there are kids whose heartstrings get pulled and they see that there's a need for something. And you hear stories of this occasionally in the news. Somebody made some masks, or they made quilts for people who need to be kept warm, or have lost everything recently due to some flooding or whatever. They collect food for homeless or for people who are in need. They get these ideas from YouTube and TikTok, and then there's also people saying, well, this is how I did it, so they go and imitate that. That's an awesome thing, right? That's more how we'd rather that happen, I think, than the negative side of it. So I know this is just a ton of information, but I'm going to keep going for a minute. Let me see what time it is. 2:30. Okay. So morphing. One thing morphing into another. Not a great title, but there it is. Morphing from binge watching to cringe watching. This generation does. And what that means is, in binge watching, many of us may have participated in. We have Netflix, we have access to a series that we can watch one after another, or watch them day after day, and we don't have to wait a week in between episodes of anything. Cringe watching is when kids watch the same thing over and over again, and it's the adults who are doing the cringing, not the kids. And that's when we have all the songs and all the words memorized, because they've watched the same thing over and over again. And these younger kids do that a lot. And they watch things you think, why in the world are you watching that? But they do, over and over. Master learning versus personalized learning. Master learning is something I think we, especially as UUs at this time, is something we do a lot. That's why you're probably here on Roundtable often, because you want to learn more about something. You want to become a master of that content, and understand it better. So TED Talks or online courses and that sort of thing, it would be the master learning. Personalized learning is really where you're taking into account not only the content, but how it's taught, and personalizing it for each person. And education is definitely going this way, which as a classroom teacher, I will tell you is scary, because our classroom model is set up as a factory model where the kids come in. It's kind of a one size fits all. We do a little bit of differentiation with the kids in there at this age level, but you're going to learn what I'm teaching you. I'm going to try and make it match a little bit to your style. But with personalized learning takes that a whole nother step. So trying to do that for I got 23 kids this year. That sounds overwhelming, trying to do that 23 ways, but it's also kind of where we're headed. Compromising is morphing into polarizing, which we see that in our politics today. But these kids are growing up with adults that's what they see. They've not had, my sons from the Z generation Z, they at least got to see what the world was like before all the polarization. These young kids, this is what they've understood. This is what life is like. And we see that in the classroom as well. And we see that on the playground. It's my way or the highway, and it creates a lot of conflict. It's something we can help kids understand. So there's hope to all this, which I'll get to in another slide in a minute. Electronics versus robotics. We use our electronics. We use our devices more on the electronic side of things. I'm going to type it in and tell you what to do, or tell it what to do, or I'm going to flip a switch and tell it what to do. Whereas robotics leans more into the AI, artificial intelligence, and it's going to do things for us. And that includes things like a smartwatch that tells you, hey, you've been sitting too long, you need to get up and move. An electronic version of that would be, I set the alarm so that when it goes off in 20 minutes, I know I need to get up and move. And with the robotics, it does it for me. It says, hey, you've been sitting, it notices you've been sitting too long. And then on demand versus make demands. We have movies on demand. We have a variety of things available to us. We just have to go and seek it out. versus make demands. I want it and I want it now because I'm not used to having to wait for things. And so that's both an attitude, and then the technology also definitely plays into that as well, because a kid can get on and it's not just a movie on demand that I want to watch whatever right now. I don't want to have to go search for it. Any questions so far? I see where I have a few typos as I was changing some of my slides, and I apologize again for that. So here are some things that we can do with the kids. There's 7 things. This is 2 slides. We can focus on the development of their emotional intelligence, helping kids learn self-management skills, how to manage their emotions, managing conflict skills. I'll share a story that takes this and exacerbates the situational. That's not the right word I want to use. In my class this year, I have a student. His mother left him and his father. His father remarried a woman who was a drug abuser. His father committed suicide, and my kid was the one who found him when he was about 7 years old, and now is living with grandmother and an uncle who is schizophrenic and in and out of Mesilla Valley Hospital. So that's a lot. That'd be a lot for any kid. But then he also is huge tech. He loves to go and disappear into playing his Minecraft and whatever other games he's into, because that's out of his reality and he can focus on that. But he really struggles with his emotional skills. He really struggles with dealing with conflict with friends, because he does not have, not only for everything that he's been through, but then this being of alpha generation to boot, really, that's where my word exacerbates comes in, really blows up his problem. So that's something that I'm really going to work on with this kid this year. Nudging kids to play with physical toys, because they spend so much time on their technology, computers, games, tablets, TV with the remote, the game remotes and whatnot. They need time to play with physical toys. So one of the suggestions was matching screen time with toys and people time, helping students cultivate different relationships. I actually in my classroom have given and helping give the kids sentence stems or questions to teach them how to have conversations with people beyond yes or no answers or talking past each other. So we do a lot of trying to learn how to relate to other people. But we need more people being aware of that and helping these kids learn those skills. Promoting time for physical activity and outdoor exercise, and maybe even combining, for me as a teacher, I can combine going outside and instead of, you remember playing horse way back when we would spell, you would be spelling the word horse and going around the shooting the basket, shooting the ball in from different angles. Maybe doing that, but with spelling words, or doing it with finding some way to turn it into a learning opportunity and not just physical. I like to do a walk and talk where I give my kids a conversation topic and we walk around the school building. So they're getting the exercise as well as trying to dig in a little bit more to some learning that we're doing, say with social studies is a great time for a walk and talk, social studies for a topic. Limiting the screen time. And I loved this one from Dr. Elmore. He said in his family, what he did with his kids was 2 hours of screen time equals you have to then spend 2 hours with real people interacting with people, not even by themselves. They had to be with people. And I thought that was a great idea. Placing boundaries on social media. And this one I thought was really so true, especially today. Kids feel entitled to their tech. So they want a phone for their birthday. They get a phone eventually after they ask and beg for it. And maybe they don't even have to ask and beg for it. The parents just get it for them because they decide that all kids nowadays have them. And then a lot of times parents don't keep up with what the kids are doing on their tech. And I love it when kids come to school and tell me I'm grounded from my phone, because it's rare that it happens. And I'm so proud of those parents. And I always tell them so too, because the parents are the ones who bought the phone. They own the phone. The kids get to use the phone. So one of the things that Dr. Elmore actually shared was a sample of a phone contract. If you use the phone in these ways, no problem. But if you start doing these things, or these are not allowed, then the phone goes back to me. And then creating margin in the day. That's a nice way to say, let kids get bored. Kids need to be bored. That's where they start developing the creativity. It's really interesting. People don't get bored. I don't know how many of you guys go to a doctor's office and pull out your phone to entertain you, whether you're texting somebody, I'm going to catch up on this, or ordering a few groceries, or playing a game. People don't know how to just sit and be anymore. But it's during those times where our brains start kind of going through. I was trying to understand when he first said this, how that worked with building empathy, but it makes sense because I have time to really reflect and think through different situations. But it also gives us a chance to build our creativity. I just think of looking up in the sky and staring at it and coming up with different shapes. That cloud looks like an elephant or a turtle or a train, whatever. But those are the kids need that time to be bored. And that was something that I was sharing with my son, so that the 8-year-old would actually, they would let her use her tablet a lot. And they finally realized, hey, this is good for her to be bored. And they discovered she started building forts in her room, and actually pulling out blocks and Legos and building things. So it really does make a difference to pull that tech out and give kids a chance to get a little bored. So this was a quote I just loved sharing with my staff. The success of the next generation does not depend entirely on them, because we are the adult leaders in their lives. And when the reason that it's in this presentation, I had used it with my staff because I found that teachers often, we tend to react to things. So these kids are coming in and they don't know how to do this. They don't know how to manage themselves. Their parents don't care. And none of that's true. But they might not have the skill set if they've not been taught it. So if we change our perspective, the adults who are my parents looking at their grandkids, for example, trying to understand, they have a different lens that they have developed their understanding of the world, then it's up to us to also help, especially this younger generation that are not adults yet. How can we help? How can we be proactive to help them get the skills, develop the skills that they need? They don't come knowing how to use a pencil and a crayon anymore, but they are really great at swiping a tablet. They cannot cut paper, not even in the 5th grade, but they're really great at finding some information on the computer. So maybe we flip it a little bit. Instead of teaching them how to use a computer, because they obviously already know, I teach them how to do some more creative things with paper. So I think as educators and adult leaders in kids' lives, we really need to rethink how we're helping mold them. So I'm almost done with the plethora of information. Senior generation, the top orange compares the senior generation to the alpha generation. Dr. Elmore talks about echo generations, and the alpha generation is an echo generation to the senior generation. So the senior generation grew up at the beginning of the 20th century, whereas the alpha generation is growing up at the beginning of the 21st century. They both experienced pandemics, the flu for the senior generation and COVID for the alpha generation. They both had the roaring 20s, and they both have economic downturns that are shaping their young lives, or shaped their young lives. So in green is, if we lead this alpha generation well, we can help them learn to be problem solvers instead of being part of the problem. We can help them embrace a service mindset, being aware of other people instead of being scared things are going to run out and there's a pandemic, and having a lot of fear. I like the next one, experiencing the post-traumatic growth, PTG, instead of PTSD. But they're going to have PTSD from their parents if we don't help them learn how to turn that into a growth opportunity. They can emerge with grit instead of the victim narrative. They can look at things with a silver lining instead of the dark cloud, and they can be resilient and resourceful. But if we don't help them find that resiliency and resourcefulness, they're going to be reactive and regretful. So it's still, the jury's still out on how the alpha generation will turn. Adult leadership, I think, has a lot to help with this. And we can really lean on what we know about the senior generation and how they turned into a very hard-working generation through all they had been through. Even though this is a different generation, it is an echo generation, and I think we can use that to help as well. So there's my note. It's a good place to stop. So I'm going to stop my share and stop share. So that was a lot of information. And I will tell you then, with the study that I did with my students, it was a 14 question questionnaire that the students answered, and they were questions that had to do with self-control, academic self-efficacy, persistence, and mastery orientation. So the questions were things kind of like, I can wait in line patiently. I raise my hand to share. I can do even the hardest homework if I try. If I do badly on a test, I work harder the next time. Students do not today. Used to, they would. Today though, they give up because they're used to that instant gratification. Seems like I was missing a slide from all that kind of talks a little bit more about some of the things a few more things we can do to help the kids, but I open it up to conversation and see what questions you guys might have. Or comments, because I imagine I've got people who've been in the classroom too that have some thoughts.
Jennifer, I'm a full generation away from being a classroom teacher.
I'm sorry, I had muted. Dave Rice, did you have something you wanted?
Are you muted?
Well, I think someone else had asked a question. I'm not sure, but this is Dave Rice anyway. If I'm cutting someone off, apologies. Some of the things you had in that list of 7 items or something like limit screen time, these were Dr. Elmore's advice.
Mhm.
It like the limit screen time, the item you proposed sort of was, you're shifting some of the keep yourself busy responsibility from the child, where the child can be said, well, here, just take my phone and keep yourself busy. But if you're limiting screen time, the adult presumably then has to be committed to the child enough or creative enough to say, well, here's something we could work on. And we all know that sometimes we think, well, just can't you entertain yourself? I'm busy over here, kind of a thing. But this younger group, I mean, they're experiencing some disappointment in the sense of, as you're saying, single parent families, maybe impatience because, again, they're used to getting the answer right away, usually from their device.
Right.
But
I think you're right on with that. Sorry, I'm hearing a little echo. It kind of throws me off a little. Okay. I think you're right on with that. I think that, I'm sorry, it's the volume, and it doesn't, when the phones do that echo, it does the same thing to me. Katie and I are sitting in the same room, and she had turned her volume up, so I apologize. I think parents, it's so easy to tell the kids to go look at something, and there's a time and place, right, for the kid to go and entertain themselves that way. But I do think we have to be careful ourselves and make sure that we have something to do. You know, this particular class that I inherited this year, they were in COVID for 3rd grade, and then for 4th grade, there were 2 gen ed teachers, and we had one of them leave right after she got established with the kids, and a brand new teacher, alternative license, so she had never done anything more than sub for a couple of months, became their classroom teacher for the school year. So she didn't have the classroom management skills or the background to do this. She did a great job with what she had, but the kids struggled with that. And the other teacher turned out to be a mentally ill person who ended up having to be removed from the classroom. And those kids, it was just, they were put on the computer for 6 hours of the 6.5 hour day they were at school. It was not okay. So I'm doing so much backup with the kids because they were treated with this, just go get on the computer, I've got something else to do. So really trying to dig in and be creative. That's kind of a side really, but that's what I'm personally dealing with this year. So I'm kind of overwhelmed, and this research really became very relevant to me. But Katie, you were going to ask a question? Okay. She said she passes.
Susan.
Oh, Susan, yeah.
Yeah, I have a,
You have your sound on?
yeah, I have my sound on, I think. They usually decide that this generation is sometime into, the life of the kids. Do they have when this generation started? Do they have any?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. It's one that sociologists kind of differ on a little bit. If it started 2011 to 2016 is kind of the time frame that they said it starts. Dr. Elmore with the United States group leans towards 2016, whereas the Australian Dr. McCrindle was suggesting 2011. So the things that define those time frames, the 2011 was right after the iPhone. Can you imagine we've not had the iPhone that terribly long in our lives, but yet it's so integral, smartphones nowadays. But it was the advent of the smartphone becoming so prevalent, was that defining his time. And then for Dr. Elmore with our US group, it was the election of Donald Trump.
Oh, okay.
And the divisiveness that became part of our, started becoming more normed, sadly.
Okay. I was thinking about, I have a granddaughter who's about to turn 10, or maybe she just did turn 10. And I watched her parents parent in a way that I had not seen. And it just blew my mind for a good long while of, like you said, with the slime, she would say, I'm going to cook. And she would go out and she would put flour and water and maybe some sugar and a handful of pecans. And she would mix up these things that,
Make it up.
And being from where I came from, I'm thinking, oh my God, pecans are so expensive, and they're just making things to throw away, right?
Right.
And she would, she liked paint, she liked art. And so they set up an easel and she knew where the paints were and she could get them out, get the brushes and paint. And, now mind you, she's 4 or something, she's not exactly neat, and but now she's 10 and she's an amazingly resourceful, creative child.
Yes.
And I thought, I couldn't have done that. I just respect her parents so much.
Well, it was hard on Zoom to watch her because she was dealing with a hot stove and she was 4 years old.
Oh no.
Yeah, she cooked something,
Yeah.
right? We're gonna cook, and I'm going, but I'm not there to go.
No, we're babysitting.
baby.
I was calling her mother on the other phone saying, get in the kitchen, this kid got off.
So I think this explains some of what I've seen. Although in the boys who are 15 and 17, so at the end of Gen Z, I guess.
Right.
There's certainly all of the technological stuff that you've described is
Right.
their entire atmosphere. Luckily, they also like music, so they do spend some time
Oh, good. Being creative and
playing their instruments but
Yeah.
I kind of fun to think about what kind of a parent And maybe it's just a parent who says, go entertain yourself. I'm busy.
Right. You know, that's actually was a good point, that when you were talking about your grandsons who are a little older, because there's not a neat like cutoff date. It's kind of a window. And so there's this kind of margin of the Gen Z that's into the alpha generation, and this margin of the alpha generation, you know. So there's always a little overlap as well. It's not just a nice, neat cutoff. So, but if a child is in elementary school right now, or has been for the last couple of years, I would definitely say they were alpha generation, based on the research I've done and what I understand about it.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. I know. I also found myself as, I don't know if mediators are the right word. It was more of a translator between my parents and their grandchildren, my sons, because they just do not understand. So my sons right now, 23 and 25, still trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives. Joshua has come back from school, getting a degree. He had a full ride scholarship, and he's working right now at Les Combs as a waiter. And they love him because he's so good at what he does, and he takes everything up several notches from what they're typically used to. But he's got so much more talent than to be there doing that. But he's still trying to figure himself out. He does not want to be told what to do. He does not like that society expects him to follow a certain narrative. And he reacts to that. And both of them do a little bit. Then my youngest found himself a young father. Unfortunately, he embraced the role and is excellent at it, but he's finding he's having to give in a little bit to that narrative in order to provide for his family. So it's kind of interesting, but I'm translating all the time, because Jack, he was Great Depression, his family experience, he experienced, right? So he has a very different mindset. And then my mother is also always a task-oriented person, you know. So
Okay.
interesting.
Thank
Dave, I see your hand.
Well, I'm just looking, I was looking at, again, the idea of the world that the generation alpha is in. You going back to one of your earlier slides, you said what kind of a structure, the command, so-called managerial structure, is this person, starting from the command structure of the gray generation before me, and the current highly collaborative whatever group that we now have. So I'm thinking of the democratic model here, where again, these individuals are used to a virtual world where maybe one, truth is more malleable. They can sort of find whatever answer they want, but if they just hunt in this box, they don't need somebody else that they can trust. They're trusting a device, which obviously is created by people, but still. So is this group going to be very difficult to govern?
You know, Dave, to be very honest, that nail on the head there with a very serious issue. I think my job as an educator is to help kids learn how to use the technology, the information that they get. Where's this information coming from? Because the filters on our search engines, if you're using Google or Bing or whatever, Edge, they have algorithms. So if you click on things and you're looking at social justice issues and you're pro-choice, you're going to get a lot of pro-choice news and a lot of pro-choice feeds your way. But if you're not pro-choice about whether it's guns or abortion or whatever, if you're not pro-choice, then you're going to get a lot of feeds and very little of the other. So, by the way, there is a website called allsides.org. If you do not know about it, I highly, highly recommend you investigate it. They are very transparent. Allsides.org. They are a group of people of journalists who wanted to make sure that the information coming to people, that they had both sides, that they understood issues. They have people who are left, they have people who are right, they have people who are center, but they have created, what do I want to call it? Rubrics, my teacher talk. They've created rubrics that help them judge text. And so I think what it is they're looking at language use. in the different articles, and they're set on a 5-point scale: far left, lean left, center, lean right, and far right. It's just absolutely interesting. Great way to get information. But they also have a piece, they have conversations, living room conversations that they've set up for people from a broad background can get together and actually have conversations with the purpose of trying to build understanding and empathy. And even if people are not on the same, don't have the same political views, that they are ethical views, that they can listen to each other and try to understand each other. They have created resources for teachers to use, particularly in the middle school and high school levels. Anyway, I think we as teachers, though, need to be very aware of that, and as parents, and we need to really help people learn where to get their information from. Again, I struggle with that even with some young adults in my life. Not my kids, fortunately, because I did teach them to verify what is the source? How do you know it's a good source? But if we don't do that, I think, yes, we are going to create even more polarization, which these kids, that's what they've grown up with. That's the lens they understand and know.
Thank you.
We'll take one more, and I see a hand up over here.
Two hands.
Yeah.
John,
Go, John.
go, John.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Jennifer, I found this very, very interesting. And I'm wondering if your slides, I'm thinking of having conversations with my kids and their kids. And
Absolutely.
I'm wondering if your slides are available publicly.
I will share them with you. I have no problem doing that. And I can make them public. Let me think about what that might look like. What if I did, like, I could put it on, say, YouTube, and I could make, well, no, YouTube's not. Let me think about the way to do that, John. But I'm
Okay.
happy to share. I don't feel like I need to own this information. I think the more people that understand or think about it even. I will tell you that there's Dr. Elmore has, and I will send this information out to you guys. He has a blog. They're about 30 minutes long each. He has one on introduction to the alpha generation. Excellent information.
Okay.
There,
I got his name down.
yes.
And just Google search for him or something.
Leading the Next Generation, I think, is the name of his blog. But email me too, and I'm happy to email you a link directly to it.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. And Janet, I saw your hand as well.
Yes, my question is about conveying all the wonderful recommendations that either you listed or maybe they came from Dr. Elmore. My background is that I worked as a school psychologist and also an educational diagnostician. And one thing I volunteered to do in the evenings or late afternoons was to create and to give workshops for parents to help children with to become more cooperative, have more study time, do things that we all want kids to do to become better students. I also did the same for teachers. And over the years, what I found was that that the best way to get across my ideas was to have role playing, was to include a lot of role playing and activities in my workshops. And so I would do things like telling parents, decrease the TV time, have a routine for study time. But I would actually role play that and map out the day, help them map out the day, and show students resisting. I would take somebody from the group who agreed to be the student or the child, and who would resist doing things like giving up their phone or giving up TV time. And then I would demonstrate how the parent could handle that resistance and get more cooperation. So I'm wondering, with all the wonderful activities that or suggestions that you have, such as limiting screen time, I find that you can't just tell parents to do that. They don't know how to do that. And their children have so much power that the parents need techniques for coping with that power. And and limiting the screen time by actually taking the phone away. They're afraid to do that though.
Right.
They're afraid their kids will get angry. And so, I would help them deal with it. Expect anger, but you do it anyway. And I had to do that with my own child with limiting her phone time. And the only way I could do that was to take the phone physically away from her. I couldn't just say, you can't use it. I had to physically take it away from her. And at night, I knew she would try to find it after I'd gone to bed. So I took it to bed with me. And most parents don't know things like this. So I'm wondering, how do you what's being done to take just lists of suggestions and putting them into a form that would show parents how to use those recommendations for their kids. Jennifer, can't hear you. I can't hear.
Doesn't look like it's there.
I think Jennifer has disappeared.
Yes.
Yeah, her connection went off.
Yeah.
Oh.
And Charlie also
Yeah,
is
I
gone.
must have had it set for time.
Well, at any rate, it is
All right.
now after 3. So I guess you'll have to send that question to Jennifer in email.
Yeah.
She doesn't appear to be coming back.
Oh, that's too bad. It was a wonderful presentation. I'm sure we're all going to probably get on Google and look up the names of the 2 men she mentioned, or the 2 people.
I wanted to ask her if she had time yet to figure out what the effect of the COVID time
Had on the learning, and yes.
Well, with our children, with my grandchildren anyway, these kids were essentially sequestered for 1.5 years.
Yes.
And that has to have an effect on, they weren't out riding their bikes like I was at their age, or running around, whatever. But, their life was interrupted for a very long period of time. And the only release they had was technology.
So I think that she would probably say that it made them more alpha, more dependent on technology, and more related to robotics and interactions with real people. I'm going to see my grandchildren on Wednesday. Haven't seen them in a year. One is 11 and one is 14, and I can't wait to ask them. They're old enough to, for me to ask them, how has your life changed? And I want to ask my daughter what she sees, and if she's seen them change back, or what she's observing. But it'd be fun to talk to my grandkids personally, and ask them. Also want to ask them, if I can get into it, how do you feel afraid when you go to school?
Do I understand we could do a roundtable on
double-A?
Do you feel afraid?
Yeah, about facing out the students, or about the shootings in the valley and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's that too. We didn't. That's one of those things they don't question anymore, right? We're in school and we could get shot.
Yeah, like I guess they have those drills just like we used to have the fire drill or air raid drill.
Or the duck and cover, the duck and cover.
That was going to help.
Like, because the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Janet, did I understand you're going to do a roundtable on security?
Yes, Charlie Welch called me Thursday night, and he asked if I would speak about our church security task force at the next roundtable. And so next Sunday, I'll be in Seattle seeing my grandkids. And the following Sunday, I will do that. I just wrote to Marie Souter and asked if she would join me. I'm waiting for a response, but yes, that will be on the 28th, the roundtable. Yes.
It's on a lot of people's minds.
Well, anyway, thank you.
Okay.
I'll look forward to hearing.
Well, yeah, Susan, yeah, please come, because there'll be discussion and questions about what did we do, and maybe, suggestions or whatever. So yes, I'm hoping you're going to be there.
Well, I think so.
Oh, I'm sorry we lost Jennifer. I think we all wanted to tell her
Yeah.
how much we enjoyed this, how much she packed into it. I found it very informative. So I guess I'll email her.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm not the host.